creatures of the night. It's your girl Tati. Let's talk about part 3 of Who Killed WCW, where we last left off. It was 1999, and Eric Bischoff was told to get the step in. They don't want him on WCW anymore, so he's gone. Now we have Bill Bush, who is appointed to being the head of WCW. He doesn't give a fuck about wrestling. He doesn't know anything about wrestling. So the first thing he does is call up Vince Russo to come on over because he doesn't know what the fuck to do. Now, here comes Vince Russo in this documentary. We haven't had him in part 1 and part 2, so now part 3, here he comes. He's coming in, and you guys, I cannot stress this. This is probably the most delusional that I've seen Vince Russo in all these years. Like, he's literally, I feel like he did this show just so he can entertain himself, just so he can hear himself talk, and these people were providing a platform for his dumb ass to come and talk. I cannot believe the level of delusion from Vince Russo, and honestly, I probably should have seen it coming. Now, y'all know Vince Russo actually got a little degree in journalism, and he was a freelance writer for WWF magazine. Now, at some point, his ass was kind of bored with what was going on at WWF. So when he's writing, he would also kind of book things however he wanted to, like fantasy booking. And people did like it. And Vince McMahon caught wind of it. And he was just like, all right, why don't you come on over and be the head writer for Raw? So now he comes over. And I'm going to give him props. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. He did help shape the Attitude Era. Absolutely. A lot of those crazy things that we found to be absolutely entertaining when we was younger. Vince Russo is a brainchild of more than half of that shit that we saw. And that's great. And he obviously contributed to the success of WWF during that time. However, it came to a time where they added a second show. You guys know SmackDown. SmackDown used to be on Thursday nights. And Vince McMahon called up Russo and said, look, bitch, we adding a Thursday show, and I want you to be the head writer for that show as well. Now, Vince Russo's just like, okay, I'm not seeing my family often. We're just doing what we're doing already with this other show. I won't be around at all. I'm going to need some more money. And Vinnie Mac was just like, no, what you're getting is just enough. And obviously Russo was not happy about this. And he decided that this is not going to work out. And honestly, I agree. You're putting this guy to work on another show and not paying him extra. I don't know what he was getting paid, but he's doing double the work. Why not pay the guy some more money? So he ends up leaving and obviously returned that phone call to WCW about working over there. Now, Vince Russo, he says that when he went to WCW, the very second he put a foot over there, that all the mid-carders start flocking over to him, and they're basically throwing out ideas on what they can do, what he can do for them, so that they can be able to move up in the company. I don't know if that's true, whatever, but if that happened, I could totally see why, because a lot of these young cats, while the mid-carders were super popular, they really weren't moving up in the ladder in terms of WCW. So Vince Russo obviously saying his hello, greetings and salutations to everybody when he comes in, and then he sees Hulk Hogan. And he said from that very second that their eyes locked, he knew that there was going to be some problems because Hogan just didn't like him at all. Now, for Vince Russo, he drew inspiration from Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer, obviously not a wrestling show, but yes, you will see people throwing down on the show. But it was really, really interesting. And when it comes to Vince Russo, I think something that he always points out is that he's in the game. He's in the game of entertainment and not necessarily wrestling itself. So for him, it was really important to get that entertainment aspect from shows like Jerry Springer and incorporate that onto the show. Now, what was an issue here was that the shows were getting so much more raunchy because of this. And probably I would say like less about wrestling and more about a lot of other foolishness where people were just like, well, we want to see more wrestling. The wrestlers are like, they want to wrestle more. It's all these crazy storylines going on. And on top of that, it's not advertiser friendly. Vince Russo was working there for 3 months, and the ratings pushed up a bit. But if you asked Vince Russo, you would have thinking that the ratings probably went up by millions of millions, and really it wasn't that much, but it was a start. It's just 3 months. So I could understand he's putting those work and getting some people to watch. And unfortunately, it really wasn't the best in terms of the company growing. Now, people in the company, they're kind of feeling some type of way about hiring Vince Russo. So they decided that they want to do a booking committee rather than Vince Russo being the head of creative. And when they brought this idea over to Vince Russo was like, bro, that don't work out for me. Y'all hired me to be the head of creative. If I'm not going to be head of creative and I got to do this little kumbaya committee thing with you guys, then I'm out. So he ends up leaving, and they're still paying him whatever it is that they're paying him, probably too much money. And here come Kevin Sullivan taking that role as the head booker of the company. He was no better. And unfortunately, we got to that point where a lot of wrestlers were very frustrated, including Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit was very frustrated. They end pretty much just handing over the world title to Chris Benoit. But Chris Benoit already was too frustrated. 15 days later, he, along with Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, they left and they were on WWF. And everybody was fucking freaking out. They pretty much let him go. They knew that it was going, but they didn't really realize that, okay, Chris is leaving with some really, really great mid-carders here, what are considered to be the future of pro wrestling, and he's taking them over to our competition, and this is a huge, huge issue for WCW. So then here is Eric Bischoff at home, pretty much sitting next to the phone saying, these motherfuckers are going to call me. I'm just going to wait. And yes, they called him. So obviously, Eric Bischoff goes back to WCW. Now, he says under his terms, he told Brad Siegel that he didn't want to be a WCW employee and that he only wanted to work directly with Brad Siegel and really no one else. Now, Brad told, well, according to Eric, Eric says that Brad told him that he was also there to oversee Vince Russo's creative ideas because they were going to bring his motherfucking ass back over there too. Now, that's according to Eric Bischoff. But then here comes Russo saying, Brad told me that Eric Bischoff was going to be over there and that he wanted us to work together. Nobody's above anybody. So no one truly like overseeing anyone. They're just working together, putting their ideas together so that they can, you know, obviously make a great product. Y'all already know how that works. If anything, that makes WCW worse. And here we have Eric Bischoff also saying that made things worse as well. Now, we do have the storyline where we had the Millionaires Club and we have the New Blood. And while this is a storyline, this is also something that's going on behind the scenes as well, where we have these OG wrestlers that's had a lot of success, not just in WCW, but within their wrestling careers, pretty much staying at the tippy top of the promotion. And then you have these mid-carders, these young bloods who are hungry and wanting to move up in the company and can't really get anywhere within the show. And this right here becomes a huge problem because fans are wanting to see these young guys and girls move on up. But we got the typical guys at the top, you know, Hogan and them still in the spotlight. Now, this is obviously an issue, and a lot of people are not happy within the company. Now, y'all remember the movie Ready to Rumble? This movie featured a lot of WCW wrestlers as well. And for them to promote the movie, they were putting David Arquette on WCW for promotional reasons. Obviously, he was going to have a match. He shouldn't be having a match anyway. But they wanted people to go ahead and see this movie. Now, they ended up having a meeting about what was going to happen at this match, and then everybody leaves. Now, according to Vince Russo, he said as soon as everybody left, Tony Schiavone called him on over, and he said, now hear me out, bro. What if David Arquette wins the World Heavyweight Championship tonight? That will help promote the movie. And Vince Russo thought it was a really great idea, so he calls everybody back into the room and he tells everybody this idea. And according to Russo, he said everybody in the room thought it was a great idea. They agreed and they wanted to do this. And as soon as he says this, now here comes the production crew of Who Killed WCW being shady as fuck and having everybody that was on the documentary saying, oh no, we didn't like the idea. I definitely said no that night. What is Vince Russo thinking? I would have never agreed to this. So you guys already know this actually ends up happening where David Arquette actually wins the title later on that night. Now, according to David, he was not he was not for the idea of him winning it, but when he won it, he was very excited. He goes to the locker room and he's celebrating. And he goes to Book and he's like, oh, Book, look at the title. Oh, I can't believe I'm champion. And he goes, well, how many times have you won the title? And Booker T said, none. I've never won the title before. And that's where it clicked to David that, I shouldn't have this title. There's people who's been doing this for so long, the professionals, and I'm just here just for fun. And I ended up winning this title, and he felt like it wasn't fair. Now, he ends up relinquishing this title, and when he does, he goes on to say on the mic in front of everybody that he doesn't deserve this title, and that, people like Booker T, he specifically names Booker T to being someone that should be holding that title. And I know a lot of people, especially during this time, absolutely agreed. Now, Vince Russo is celebrating this whole foolishness because he says, oh, that this was a win for us because we made it to the front page of USA Today newspaper. And I'm just like, what does that have to do with anything? This was still a horrible idea. There are killers and people doing stupid shit that ends up being on the front page. So you're making it seem like you guys making the front page is a flex? Like, bro, are you serious? Now, he said if it was up to him, he would do it all over again. Eric Bischoff said he didn't like the idea, but he went along with it and participated, even though he didn't care too much for it. Now, they also asked Booker T why did he think that he never won the title up until that point, and he said because he's black. And I personally agree, but I think also what makes that more difficult as a black man with all this politicking going around and friends looking out for friends and people doing all this shady shit, that puts the black man way at the back of the line when it comes to, winning a title, And unfortunately, it should have never been that way. Now we're at the point where we have Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff butting heads about every little thing under the sun. And Vince Russo says Brad had called him up. Brad Siegel called him up and said, we need you to be head of creative because Eric Bischoff, he's fucking up or whatever situation they told him. That's what Russo said. And then he goes on to throws in, that if it wasn't for Eric Bischoff, if Eric Bischoff would just not have been there, that he know that he and Hulk Hogan, Vince Russo and Hulk Hogan of all people, would have been as thick as thieves, besties and everything. And I'm just like, bro, I don't even think I believe that. And after Russo got that call from Brad about being head of the creative, like he says, a few days later is when we have the whole Bash at the Beach 2000 fuckery. And y'all know how that goes. All right, so you guys already know about the whole Bash at the Beach 2000 fiasco. So I'm not going to go too much at length about it. If you're not too familiar, I did do a review about the Dark Side of the Ring episode about it. So go ahead and check that out if you want a more in-depth, analysis about what happened during this time. Now, you guys already know Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff, they're both working at the company. They're butting heads about things. And for this pay-per-view, we have Hogan who's still having his contract that he can do whatever the fuck he wants. And nobody can do anything about that. Now, Eric Bischoff basically is at Hogan's feet, like, Daddy, what do you want me to do in terms of booking you for a pay-per-view? And Hogan obviously has his ideas, and they go with that dumb shit. And Hogan and Bischoff ends up leaving with the World Heavyweight Championship and flying out to wherever they were going in that jet. Now, here we have Vince Russo, who's really upset about this whole thing, who goes into the ring and he gives a really unhinged, crazy, but real type of promo where according to him, this is just a promo. I mean, there's no malice towards it or whatever. He's just going out there providing entertainment. And he goes, he had to do this promo because it was going to make sense as to why he was going to introduce for Booker T to go against Jeff Jarrett for the World Heavyweight title that what Hogan already left with. Now, right after this, we do have Booker T, who's backstage, and he has to do a promo minutes after hearing that he's going to be in this title match. And he's like, well, I don't know what the hell's going on, but obviously the title's on the line and he is being booked to win this. So he's down with it. It is what it is. Now, obviously, some people somewhere in this world was okay with what happened at Bash at the Beach, while the rest of us was just, what the fuck is this? Like, do y'all remember Shivani and them on commentary just looking like so embarrassed about being part of that company? Like, it's absolutely insane. So obviously Booker T ends up winning the title later on that night. Everybody's happy for him or whatever. Now, here comes Eric and Hogan getting off their little jet, and their phones are blowing up. And that's when they're starting to hear voicemails and people calling to tell them, like, what the fuck is happening at the pay-per-view? And they end up finding out what ended up happening from there. Now, obviously, y'all know Eric Bischoff's just like, fuck it, I'm going home. He don't want nothing to do with the company. And y'all know Hogan sued the company for, I forgot how much he sued him for, but he probably still got that money in a vault somewhere. Absolutely insane, because he's crying about things not going his way. And it's crazy. Well, I don't commend what happened. I personally think that it's crazy that things ended up going that way anyway, because it's just like, well, what you going to do? You have this guy who has a contract where he's just always on top. And like, what can you do about these younger guys who want to move up in this company? And it's absolutely insane. But anyway, Vince Russo, he still at the company. He's absolutely just gone berserk, and he starts incorporating himself in every storyline, on every episode. It's just like you could not escape this guy. And he even puts the world title on himself, and he goes, well, despite me not being a wrestler, I had to do that, put a title on me because that's what's best for business during that time. And he goes, besides, I was a better on-screen character than 80% of the roster. When he said that, I was like, bitch, I'm going to turn this shit off right now. This is just absolutely insane how delusional he was. And he goes on to say that, I came up with what I did at Bash at the Beach 2000, and I'm really proud of it. So many people were proud of me. They said that I saved WCW. Like, did you really save WCW, bro? I think you were just looking at other people's delusional comments and letting that feed this ego. And that obviously led him to really incorporating himself into the stories and all these things. So now, Russo is in this cage, right? And there's 3 other wrestlers in there. Goldberg comes in there, and Goldberg's supposed to have this spot where he is supposed to spear Russo. Now, Russo, he said that he told Goldberg 10 times, because he counted, to be careful with him. He's a delicate little flower. He has a concussion. Now, Goldberg goes on for the spear. He spears Russo through the cage wall, and then Russo ends up hitting his head on the barricade, metal barricade, obviously, and it doesn't look pretty. And according to Russo, he goes, well, he knows that Goldberg had personal issues towards him and that he wanted to hurt him on purpose. Then here comes Goldberg reacting to what Russo said, and he goes, well, if I really wanted to hurt him, he'd be 6 feet under. And I'm just like, holy shit, it's a whole bunch of dudes here, and everybody here is being petty betties, and I'm actually liking the drama here. Now, we do end off this episode with Vince Russo talking about how much he hates the business, and he goes that he knows that a lot of people wouldn't agree with him saying that, but honestly, it's just like, bro, look at me saying, bro, holy shit. Okay. I don't understand what it is. What Russo has been saying for years, that he hates the business. Even, I think last year, or maybe the year before, he went on a rant on online talking about how much he hates the business, but he's forced to still stay in the business by writing reviews for WWE. And I'm just like, nobody's forcing you to write reviews for WWE. You have this little journalism degree. Why don't you use it to cover other things instead of wrestling if you hate it so much? And for me, I personally am not a fan of Russo, but watching this, I'm just like, mental illness is absolutely a thing, and there are people out there who will who would watch something with you, who would be part of something with you, and then they will tell you you saw something else. And Vince Russo, this whole time, while I'm gonna give Eric Bischoff a little bit of credit, he did admit to a couple of things once or twice on this episode where he took accountability. But Vince Russo absolutely took no accountability for being part of what killed the company. This was definitely very annoying. My eyes hurt from rolling them for a whole hour straight. Now, guys, we have part 4, which is the last of this whole documentary. It's just basically going to be talking about the last days of WCW. So that's going to be interesting to wrap this whole thing up. This was a really great episode, but if you're annoyed by Vince Russo, it's going to be tough to sit through. And the level of delusion, which is fucking sky high here with Vince Russo, is just so appalling. I can't even believe I sat through that. But still, overall, another great episode. Can't wait to see how they end this whole thing off. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. You can catch me with all my other reviews to all the other shows that I've done. And you can catch me for watch-alongs for AEW Ring of Honor. I'll see you guys then.